What if I told you some houses in America don't just creak at night? They answer back. Homes where lights turn on by themselves, footsteps walk the halls when no one's there, and some residents swear they were never alone.
Number 10. The Whaley House, San Diego, California. The Whaley House doesn't look like a place where something terrible happened. From the outside, it looks calm, historic, almost welcoming, the kind of house tourists walk into expecting a quiet tour and a few old stories. But what most visitors don't realize is that the house itself was never the beginning of the haunting. Long before the walls were built, before the Whaley family ever lived there, this land was already associated with death. In the mid-1800s, this exact spot was used as San Diego's public gallows. Executions took place here, in front of crowds, and one of the men who died on this land would later become central to the house's dark reputation. His name was James Yankee Jim Robinson, and his execution was anything but quick. Witnesses said the hanging went wrong, and then he suffered for several minutes before dying. People who were there believed his anger never left the ground beneath him, and when Thomas Whaley decided to build his family home on this land in 1857, locals warned him not to do it. Whaley ignored those warnings.
Not long after the family moved in, strange things began to happen. At first, it was subtle. Doors left closed were found open. Cold drafts moved through rooms with no windows open. Then the sounds began. Heavy footsteps were heard coming from upstairs late at night, even when everyone in the house was asleep. These weren't random noises or creaking wood. They sounded deliberate, like someone walking back and forth with purpose. Over time, these sounds became impossible to ignore. Family members and later staff would hear the footsteps move from one end of the house to the other, sometimes stopping just outside a doorway, as if someone was standing there listening. When people checked, the rooms were always empty. Visitors today still report seeing figures inside the house, especially near the staircase. Multiple people, unaware of the house's history, describe seeing a young girl wearing an old-fashioned dress. She doesn't speak and doesn't react to anyone around her. She simply appears for a moment and then fades away. One tour guide said she felt a small hand tug on her clothing while telling guests about the house, and when she turned around, no one was there, only a sudden wave of cold air. Music is another experience frequently reported. Thomas Whaley's wife was known to play the piano, and long after her death, visitors began hearing soft piano music drifting through the house. The notes sound distant and unfinished, as if someone stops playing the moment they realize they're being heard. Staff members who rush to the parlor always find the piano untouched, its lid closed, with no explanation for where the sound came from. Employees working in the house say the feeling inside changes after dark. The air feels heavier, and many describe the sensation of being watched as they move from room to room. Motion sensors have been triggered late at night with no visible cause, and security cameras have captured unexplained activity, though nothing ever clearly appears on screen. What makes the Whaley House unsettling isn't violent encounters or dramatic apparitions. It's the way people react after spending time inside. Visitors often grow quiet. Some experience dizziness or nausea and leave tours early without knowing why. Almost everyone reports a feeling of pressure, like the house is aware of them being there. Even skeptics, people who don't believe in ghosts at all, admit something about the house feels wrong. Not frightening in an obvious way, but persistent, like something that never left and never plans to. The Whaley House doesn't try to scare you. It doesn't need to. It simply reminds you that some places remember everything that happened there, and that sometimes the past doesn't stay in the past. And if you ever hear footsteps behind you while standing alone in that house, the most unsettling part is knowing they've been heard for over a century. by people who swore they were alone too. Number 9. The Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. The Winchester Mystery House doesn't feel like a normal home. The moment you step inside, nothing about it flows the way a house should. Hallways turn suddenly, staircases end in ceilings, and doors open into walls, as if the house itself forgot what it was supposed to become. This strange design wasn't an accident. It began with Sarah Winchester, the widow of William Wirt Winchester, whose family made their fortune manufacturing rifles. After her husband and infant daughter died, Sarah became convinced that she was being haunted by the spirits of people killed by Winchester weapons. According to legend, a medium told her the only way to survive was to keep building, so the spirits would never find her. Sarah believed it completely. Construction began in 1884 and continued for nearly 4 decades without stopping. Workers were hired in rotating shifts, so the sound of hammers and saws never faded, not even at night. The house grew randomly, guided not by blueprints, but by what Sarah claimed were instructions from the spirits themselves. As the house expanded, it became increasingly confusing. Staircases rose only a few steps before stopping. Doors opened onto empty drops. Windows were placed in floors and ceilings. Entire rooms were sealed off and forgotten. Some believe this was done to confuse spirits. Others believe Sarah was being guided by something that wanted the house to remain unfinished forever. Even after construction ended, with Sarah's death in 1922, the strange activity didn't stop. Visitors and staff began reporting footsteps moving through the halls late at night, often in areas closed to the public. Security guards have said they hear the sound of distant hammering, as if construction never truly ended. When they investigate, the noise disappears. Many guests describe the feeling of being watched, especially in the narrow hallways and staircases. Some report sudden chills or dizziness, while others say the house feels heavier the deeper you go, as if the walls are closing in. A few visitors claim that rooms feel warm one moment and freezing the next, without explanation. One of the most commonly reported sightings is a man dressed in early 1900s work clothes, believed to be a former construction worker. He's often seen pushing a wheelbarrow or standing in doorways, only to vanish when approached. Others claim to see Sarah Winchester herself moving quietly through the halls, inspecting her endless creation.
What unsettles people most isn't any single event, but the sense that the house is still following rules no one understands. Rooms feel deliberately misplaced. Paths seem designed to mislead. Some visitors say they feel disoriented, even when standing still, as if the house subtly shifts around them. Staff members have reported motion sensors activating in empty rooms and doors opening that were securely closed moments before. Security footage sometimes shows shadows moving across walls, though no source can ever be identified. The house never reveals anything clearly, it only hints. Today, millions of people have walked through the Winchester Mystery House, and many leave with the same question. Was Sarah Winchester protecting herself from the dead, or was she unknowingly building something meant to contain them? Because the house doesn't feel abandoned, it feels paused, like it's waiting for construction to start again. And some believe it will.
Number 8. The Villisca Axe Murder House, Iowa. The Villisca Axe Murder House looks like any other small-town home. White siding, a porch out front, quiet streets all around it. Nothing about it prepares you for what happened inside. And maybe that's what makes it so unsettling. Evil didn't arrive with warning here. It slipped in quietly in the middle of the night and never left. In June of 1912, 8 people were murdered in this house while they slept. 6 of them were children. The killer used an axe that belonged to the family, and every victim was struck in the same way, their faces covered afterward with clothing or sheets. Windows were covered, mirrors were hidden. Whoever did this moved through the house calmly, deliberately, as if they had all the time in the world. The crime shocked the nation, but it was never solved. No arrest was ever made. No clear suspect was ever confirmed. Over time, the house went quiet again, but people in Villisca claimed it never truly emptied. Neighbors reported strange lights, sounds, and the feeling that someone was still inside long after the murders faded from the headlines. Decades later, when the house was open to visitors, those feelings returned almost immediately. People reported hearing footsteps on the stairs late at night, even when the house was empty. Others claimed doors opened on their own, slowly, without a sound. Some visitors felt sudden waves of sadness or fear the moment they entered certain rooms, especially the children's bedrooms.
What unsettles people the most are the voices. Guests staying overnight have reported hearing whispers, often calling out names. Some say they hear children laughing softly, as if playing a game in another room. When they investigate, the house is silent. The laughter never repeats itself the same way twice. Paranormal investigators who spent nights inside the house describe intense activity after midnight. Motion sensors activate with no visible cause. Objects are found moved from where they were placed. One investigator reported feeling a cold hand grip his arm while standing alone in a bedroom. Another claimed something whispered directly into his ear. Several visitors have said the house feels angry, not sad, not lost, angry. The air feels heavy, almost suffocating, especially in the upstairs rooms. Some guests experience headaches, nausea, or dizziness and have to leave early. Others report nightmares that begin the night they visit and continue long after they've gone home. Perhaps the most disturbing part is how the house reacts to attention. The more people focus on what happened there, the more activity seems to increase. Lights flicker, sounds become louder. The house seems to respond, as if it doesn't want the events of that night forgotten, but doesn't want them understood either. Many people who've stayed overnight say the same thing afterward. They never felt alone, even when the house was silent, even when they were awake, even when the lights were on. The Villisca Axe Murder House doesn't rely on shadows or imagination. Its horror is rooted in something real, something violent, something unresolved. And maybe that's why so many people believe the spirits of that night are still trapped inside, repeating their final moments in a place where time stopped more than a century ago. Because some houses remember what happened in them, and some refuse to let it go.
Number 7. The Myrtle's Plantation, Louisiana. The Myrtle's Plantation sits quietly beneath towering oak trees, its long veranda wrapped in shade and Spanish moss. At first glance, it looks peaceful, even beautiful, like a place frozen in time. But for many who visit, that calm feeling doesn't last long. There's a sense that something is watching from the shadows, something that's been there far longer than any guest. Built in 1796, the plantation has seen generations of families pass through its rooms, along with the suffering of countless enslaved people who lived and died on the land. Over time, stories began to circulate about strange occurrences inside the house, stories that were passed down long before tourists ever arrived. One of the most famous spirits associated with the plantation is a woman believed to be named Chloe. According to legend, she was an enslaved woman who was punished and forced to wear a green turban to cover part of her ear. Guests and staff report seeing a woman in period clothing standing near doorways or watching from the end of the hallways. She's often described as solid, not transparent, and sometimes mistaken for a living person until she vanishes. Visitors also report seeing children playing on the stairs or running through the halls late at night. Footsteps are commonly heard in empty rooms, and doors open and close on their own. Some guests wake up to find handprints on mirrors that weren't there before, appearing overnight and fading by morning. Photographs taken at the plantation have captured strange figures, including a small girl standing between columns on the veranda. In some images, she appears to be smiling. In others, her face looks distorted, as if the image was never meant to be captured clearly. Those who stay overnight often describe restless sleep. Rocking chairs have been seen moving gently without anyone near them. Soft voices and whispers have been heard in the early hours of the morning. A few guests say they felt someone sit on the edge of their bed, only to find the room empty when they open their eyes. What makes the Myrtle's plantation unsettling is how calm the activity feels. There were no sudden noises or violent events. Everything happens quietly, as if the spirits are simply continuing their routines, unaware that the living are sharing the space. Some visitors feel comforted by the presence, while others feel an overwhelming sadness that follows them from room to room. Staff members say certain areas of the house feel heavier than others, particularly the upstairs bedrooms, where the air seems thick and difficult to breathe. The plantation doesn't feel abandoned or hostile. It feels occupied, as if the past never fully released its hold on the land. People come and go, but whatever remains inside the Myrtles stays exactly where it is, watching as time moves forward without it. And when night falls and the house grows quiet, many guests say the most unsettling realization is that nothing inside seems to be sleeping.
Number 6. The Sally House, Atchison, Kansas. The Sally House doesn't stand out when you first see it. It looks like a normal family home in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place you'd pass without a second glance. That's part of what makes the story so disturbing. Whatever lives here doesn't announce itself. It waits. In the early 1990s, a young couple moved into the house expecting nothing more than a fresh start. At first, things felt normal, almost too normal. Then the sounds began. Footsteps echoed through the halls at night. Objects were found in places they didn't belong. Doors opened and closed on their own. The couple believed the activity might be caused by a child. They named the presence Sally, imagining a little girl who once lived in the house. At first, the activity seemed playful. Toys moved, small noises echoed from empty rooms, but the tone of the house began to change. Scratches appeared on the husband's body, deep and sudden, often forming while he slept. Nightmares became constant. He described feeling watched, followed, and pushed into violent emotional states he couldn't control. Friends who visited the house experienced the same fear and anger even when they didn't know its history. Paranormal investigators were called in, and what they encountered was far from childlike. Growls were heard in the basement. Heavy footsteps moved quickly through the house. Furniture shifted violently without warning. One investigator reported being thrown across a room. Many believe the entity uses the image of a child to gain trust before revealing its true nature. Others believe the house contains something far darker that predates any family who lived there. Whatever it is, it seems to feed on fear, growing stronger the longer people stay. Those who have spent time inside the Sally House describe intense physical sensations. Sudden pressure on the chest, sharp pains, the feeling of being watched from just outside their field of vision. Some say the house creates anger and paranoia, turning people against one another. Even after the original couple moved out, the activity continued. Visitors reported being scratched, shoved, or spoken to directly. Equipment malfunctioned, cameras shut off unexpectedly. Recordings captured voices that didn't belong to anyone present. What makes the Sally House especially unsettling is how personal the experiences feel. The activity doesn't happen at random. It targets individuals. It reacts. It responds. The house doesn't feel haunted in the traditional sense. It feels inhabited by something that doesn't want to be challenged, something that doesn't want to be exposed, and something that doesn't want you there. And the longer you stay inside, the clearer that message becomes. Number 5.
The Bell Witch House, Tennessee. The story of the Bell Witch doesn't begin with a house. It begins with a family that slowly realized they were no longer alone, even in broad daylight. In the early 1800s, the Bell family lived on a quiet farm in Tennessee, where nothing seemed unusual at first. Then, strange things began to happen. Small enough to ignore, but frequent enough to notice. John Bell started seeing animals that didn't behave normally, a dog with the head of a rabbit, a bird that vanished when approached. Soon after, knocking sounds echoed through the house at night, followed by scratching on the walls and ceiling. At first, the family blamed rodents or settling wood, but the sounds grew louder and more deliberate. Before long, a voice began to speak. It didn't whisper, it didn't hide, it spoke clearly and intelligently, identifying itself as a spirit that had come to torment the Bell family. The voice knew personal details about their lives, repeated conversations that happened miles away, and predicted future events with unsettling accuracy. The entity focused much of its attention on John Bell and his daughter, Betsy. Betsy was slapped, pinched, and pulled by unseen hands. Witnesses claimed to see her hair yanked violently as she screamed, surrounded by people who could do nothing to help her. The attacks often happened in front of guests, removing any doubt that the events were imagined. John Bell's health rapidly declined. He complained of strange pains, difficulty speaking, and episodes of paralysis. One morning, he was found unconscious, and a mysterious vial of liquid appeared beside his bed. After the liquid was administered, John Bell died. The voice reportedly celebrated his death, claiming responsibility. The haunting didn't end there. The spirit continued to speak with visitors, including future President Andrew Jackson, whose men allegedly fled the property after being attacked by unseen forces. Over time, the Bell family left the land, but the presence never fully disappeared. Today, visitors report hearing whispers, knocks, and voices near the original Bell property and nearby cave systems. The air feels heavy, and many say they experience sudden fear or panic without warning. Some report feeling touched or followed while exploring the area. Unlike many hauntings, the Bell Witch seemed aware of itself. It responded to questions, showed intelligence, and chose its targets carefully. That awareness is what continues to disturb people the most. This wasn't something trapped. It wasn't confused. It knew exactly what it was doing. And some believe it's still there, waiting for someone to listen. Number 4. The Amityville House. The house in Amityville looks ordinary, and that's part of why its story unsettled so many people. It sits quietly in a suburban neighborhood, with neatly trimmed lawns and calm water behind it, giving no sign of what happened there or why its name became famous across the country. In 1974, a man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered 6 members of his family inside the house while they slept. The crime was brutal and unexplained, and the house was left empty for a time. When the Lutz family moved in a year later, they believed the worst was already over. They were wrong. Almost immediately, the family reported strange experiences. Cold spots appeared in certain rooms. Doors slammed shut on their own. A persistent foul odor moved through the house with no clear source. At night, George Lutz claimed to wake up at the same exact time every morning, feeling as though something was pulling him from sleep. The children said they heard voices and saw figures watching them from the dark. Kathy Lutz reported being touched by unseen hands and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Red eyes were seen glowing in windows. Slime was said to seep from the walls. After just 28 days, the family fled the house, leaving their belongings behind. Over the years, people have debated whether the events were exaggerated or imagined, but one thing hasn't changed. Anyone who steps inside the house describes a strange heaviness, as if the walls are holding on to something they shouldn't. Neighbors have reported unexplained noises and sudden feelings of unease while walking past it, even decades later. Whether the haunting was real or not, the Amityville house became something more than a crime scene. It became a symbol of a place where violence left a mark so deep that people still feel it long after the doors were closed. And for many, the most unsettling thought isn't what happened there, but the idea that a house can remember. Number 3. The McRaven House. The McRaven House sits quietly in Vicksburg, Mississippi, looking more like a preserved piece of history than a place people whisper about. Built in the late 1700s, it has stood through wars, epidemics, and generations of families, and with each passing era, something seems to have stayed behind. During the Civil War, the house was used as a field hospital, and soldiers were brought inside to die. Later, outbreaks of yellow fever claimed more lives within its walls. Over time, reports of strange activity began to surface, passed down as stories long before investigators ever arrived. Visitors today describe hearing slow, heavy footsteps moving through empty rooms. Some claim to hear coughing or soft moaning late at night, as if someone is struggling to breathe. Others report the sound of a child playing on the staircase, footsteps running up and down when no one is there. One of the most commonly reported figures is a woman dressed in black, often seen standing in doorways or sitting silently near beds. Guests staying overnight have said they woke to the feeling of someone sitting at the edge of the mattress, pressing down slightly before the sensation suddenly disappeared. What unsettles people most is how calm the house feels. The activity isn't violent or sudden. It feels routine, as if whatever remains inside is simply continuing life the way it always has. The house doesn't feel abandoned. It feels occupied. People who leave the McRaven house often say the same thing. Nothing dramatic happened, but they never felt alone. And sometimes, that's far more disturbing than seeing something you can run away from. Number 2. The LaLaurie House. The LaLaurie House stands in the French Quarter of New Orleans, surrounded by music, crowds, and life. Yet the moment you focus on it, the noise seems to fade. The house carries a reputation so dark that even people who don't believe in hauntings admit it feels wrong to stand nearby. In the early 1800s, the home belonged to Madame Delphine LaLaurie, a wealthy socialite known publicly for her elegance and charm. Behind closed doors, however, neighbors began to notice disturbing signs. Screams were reportedly heard late at night, and enslaved people were seen in poor condition. No one imagined just how bad things truly were until a fire broke out in the house. When authorities entered to rescue those inside, they discovered horrific conditions in the upper rooms. What was found shocked even seasoned officials, and the house was quickly abandoned. Madame LaLaurie fled the city, but the damage had already been done. The house never escaped its past. Years later, residents and visitors reported hearing cries and screams coming from inside, even when the building was empty. Shadows were seen moving behind windows. Some people claimed to feel sudden nausea or panic while standing inside certain rooms, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. Those who've passed by late at night describe hearing footsteps and whispers drifting from the upper floors. Others say the house gives off a sense of intense dread, stronger than anywhere else in the area. Even during the day, the building feels heavy, as though something inside refuses to rest. The LaLaurie House doesn't feel like a place haunted by confusion or loss. It feels haunted by memory, and many believe those memories are too strong to ever fade. Number 1. The Perron family house, the Conjuring House. The house sits quietly on a stretch of land in Rhode Island, surrounded by trees and open fields, looking peaceful enough that no one would expect it to be one of the most disturbing haunted houses in America. For years, it was simply known as the Perron family home until the experiences that happened inside became impossible to ignore. In the early 1970s, the Perron family moved into the house hoping for a fresh start. Almost immediately, they noticed strange things. Objects went missing and reappeared in different rooms. Clocks stopped at the same time every night. The smell of rotting meat drifted through the house without any source. At first, the family tried to ignore it, believing the house was simply old. That changed when the activity became more aggressive. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered constantly. The children claimed to see figures watching them from dark corners of the rooms. The mother, Carolyn Perrin, experienced the worst of it. She reported being thrown from her bed, dragged across the floor, and waking with unexplained bruises. The family later learned the land had a long history of death and tragedy, including accusations of witchcraft and violent deaths stretching back centuries. They believed the spirits attached to the property, not just the house, and that some of them were deeply hostile. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were eventually called in to help. During their investigation, witnesses reported possessions, levitations, and violent reactions to prayers. Some present claimed to see Carolyn lifted from her chair and thrown across the room. The Warrens believed one spirit in particular had attached itself to her and was trying to drive the family out. Even after the parents left, reports of activity continued. Later owners experienced footsteps, voices, and shadow figures moving through the house at night. Visitors describe intense fear, pressure, and the sensation of being watched, especially in the upper rooms. What makes the Perrin house so unsettling isn't just the number of reports, but how consistent they are. Different people, years apart, describe the same rooms, the same feelings, the same presence. The house doesn't feel chaotic, it feels controlled. And many believe whatever lives there doesn't want people to scare away, it wants them to stay.